Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James, for having me. Really appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to chopping up some hobby, probably a little sports mixed in there as well.
So you run the Sportscard Nation podcast. People can follow you on, I guess now it's X, Sportscard 91. Of course, check out your website, sportscardnationpodcast.com, where you got all your previous podcasts as well as some of your upcoming events, a lot of cool stuff. So check it out. So again, I appreciate you coming here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on and asking me. So look forward to it.
So I looked at some of your history, your background. I guess you got your first kicks of being a baseball card fan with in '79 with a Reggie card. So just tell us that story.
Yeah, I was a sports kid. It's in '79. I was 7. They probably baseball cards were the first cards I had. I remember getting some of the Jaws cards from the movie, but just kind of throwing them around and not taking care of them too much. And I was raised by my grandparents, born in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And I remember my grandfather said, "Hey, Johnny, you want to come to the corner store with me? I got to pick up a few things," and I did. And I remember seeing the box of 1979 tops on that counter, and just from knowing the Jaws cards, I kind of put two and two together that those are baseball cards. And mentioned it to my grandfather. Hey kid, those are baseball cards, can I get some? And he says, I'll get you a couple packs. And the first pack that I opened, like the fourth or fifth card in, was Reggie Jackson. And anyone, whether you were in New York at the time or you didn't have to be in New York at the time, you knew Mr. October and kind of what an icon of baseball, especially at that time. And with some of the World Series accolades he did, Mr. October. And Reggie wasn't necessarily my favorite player, but being a New York City kid, and I was a Thurman Munson kid, but obviously at that time we already lost him. But everyone knew what Reggie meant to the Yankees at that time, and so pulling that card, I kind of was hooked. And as I often say, I wanted the cards where my friends wanted the gum. And so I'd give them my gum and they'd give me some of their cards. Now I still got my cavities. I just got it from drinking soda rather than the Topps gum.
So then, obviously you go to your first card show, I believe you mentioned in '87, when you first attended your
Eight,
first.
eight, 87 was the first card show I did as a dealer at 15
Okay.
years old, which is crazy in itself, especially during that time period. I started working in a card shop called Seventh Inning Stretch for a gentleman named Rudy Backstein, and I just was in there almost every day, James, to the point he just said, "Listen, I need help. You're here." I'm 13 years old at that time, so this is now 85, and he's like, "I'm going to put you to work." It was, I more or less got drafted into working, but it was a great experience for me because I learned so much, like hands-on experience and learning about the history of the hobby at a very early age. And I'm glad I did because I'm a history guy, not even just in the hobby, but just in life. And so learning early on and then talking to older folks in the hobby and just kind of like, hey, well, how did this happen? Or why is it like this? I kind of really brushed up on my hobby history. And I think that helps you. And, nothing's guaranteed in life or in the hobby, but sort of knowing how the history of the hobby is can probably help you more than hurt you.
So yeah, you kind of just got your feet thrown in the fire there. So yeah, I don't know if I
Yeah.
would have been able to handle that at 13.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. Like he said, you're here almost every day. You might as well help me out. And a lot of the first things I did were just like making storage boxes, stuff he didn't really like to do. I kind of got that, but but I also learned through osmosis and being in the shop and hearing those conversations. And then, like you said, in '87, I was working the shows with him. And a lot of my friends are like, John, you've got quite the collection now. you should like do shows yourself. And I'm like, I don't know, I work with Rudy. It's I'm 15 years old, and they really kind of stayed on me. And I think ultimately I succumbed to sort of that peer pressure and wound up getting, with my grandfather's help, getting a tax number, and then doing it. I remember even telling Rudy that I was going to try this, and you know, he wasn't super excited because he knew, he was going to lose sort of his right hand kid at that time. And I wasn't doing it in a malicious fashion. I wasn't mad. I wasn't unhappy. There was nothing bad. It was just I wanted to try it on my own, just from amassing a pretty good collection. And so, I did. And just people have heard my podcast and probably heard the story, but that first show here, I'm 15 years old, and this is 87, and I wound up making $1,500 that day. It was a 1 day show, and $1,500 in 1987 is a lot more than $1,500 today. And I remember coming home, I had this big bulge in my pocket. Here I am, your 15-year-old kid, and my grandma said, how'd you do? And I couldn't even say 1,500. Like, I didn't even know the lingo. So I said 1,500. I think I got $1,500 in my pocket. She was like shocked on two fronts, James. One, that baseball cards can make you that sort of coin. And the fact that I had that on me, and she's like, you got to start a bank account. You can't walk around with that in your pocket. You can't take that to school. I need to hold it for you until we open the bank account. She was very nervous about it, and open that account, and really been, I knew very early on after that show, like, I'm probably going to be in it for the long haul. And here I am. It's 2023. I'm now 50 years old. Be 51 in November. And so, but I knew, and not just the money, James, don't get me wrong, being 15 and having that kind of on you definitely doesn't hurt those feelings. But I really loved, sports, and I really loved card collecting and the hobby. So all those was like the perfect recipe for, I knew I was going to stick around in some form or fashion.
Now, did you like learn some sort of tool or negotiating tactics something early on that let you to be successful this early?
Uh, I love to give you a different answer to that question. I was terrible socially at that point. I was a very shy kid. I remember, I would kind of sit down. Since most of the sales, hate to say this, but I got to be honest and not disingenuous. Most of the sales made themselves. I remember a gentleman came over and just assumed like that my father must have went to the bathroom or was away from the table. And so I don't remember what card it happened to be, but he's like, hey, I'm interested in this card. I want to kind of see if we could do a little bit better in price. When your dad will be back. And, I said, well, this is kind of my stuff. And, the look on his face, we wound up negotiating a sale for that card. But I wouldn't say I was good at it. I just sort of managed to sort of scrape by. But I've socially at that point, I was very shy. I wouldn't say, hey, how are you? Is there anything you're looking for? I had no sort of, you know, salesmanship or great social skills. I like to think I have them more now, or that those improve. But at that first show, it was probably not a textbook of how to run a table. I just must have caught lightning in the bottle, or maybe more of a testament to the inventory I had rather than my sales capabilities. But you do stuff enough times, you sort of learn and get better at it. And through the years, I think I have. But at that time, not a chance. I was more lucky than good, as they like to say.
And so the actual podcast, Sports Card Nation podcast. So when did you get that off the ground? I see you got like, a couple hundred, 200 like plus episodes in, but like when did you actually, what inspired you to do it? And, when did you get it going?
Yeah, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of the story. It's kind of a longer one, but I'll make it short. I have a friend. At this point, I'm in Syracuse, now, New York, now upstate New York. I have a friend. His name's Dan Tatura, who's from Syracuse, but he was in Orlando. He went took journalism. He was a broadcaster, and he was working for ESPN Radio in Orlando, Florida, and having a great time. And all of a sudden, sort of I think he got a new broadcast manager, and things kind of changed. They were kind of telling them, hey, here's the topics. Not only here are the topics you're going to talk about, Dan, but this is your take. This is your stance. And he would say, that's not my stance. Like I feel the opposite of that. Well, they're like, for the show, you know, that's not going to be what the stance you take. And so, like he explained, it became like WWE sort of had a script that he had to play a role, and that was really went against kind of all his morals and ethics. And like he tell you, he went from driving to work loving his job to driving his work and hating that job to who was making a meal, and he felt like a phony and a sellout. I remember him asking me what would you do, or and be like, that's all. I can't tell you what to do. I just don't know. I'm an opinionated guy. I'm like that. I'd probably wind up getting fired if not quitting, just because I would probably not follow exact orders, and it was really making them unwell and not in a good place. And so, he came back to Syracuse. He built a studio in his basement, and he launched his own company, Dan Tutoria Broadcast Media, and did daily shows, sports. These are all he's all sports and talking about the events and sports from the prior day every morning. And I had Fridays off from my job. He collected cards a little bit, not in the same vein as me, but he knew I was, had a store for 7 years and was still doing shows and that sort of thing. And he asked me, hey, how about coming on Friday, bring some cards of some of the stuff going on in the sports world, some key figures, athletes, and we'll kind of bridge the two worlds, cards, the hobby, and the sports world. And so it was an hour and a half segment. It was supposed to be a one, 1 day show, Friday, just for one episode show, and it just was a huge hit. People were calling in. He was getting emails like, is John gonna be on every Friday with you, Dan?" And that sort of thing. And he called me later that afternoon, and he's like, "You have every Friday off, right?" And I'm like, "Right now I do, but my schedule could change it, but for now I do." He goes, "I've got like a ton of feedback. People want this every Friday. Can you do it?" And so I agreed, and wound up being 15 weeks, and my schedule wound up changing. They wanted me to come in at least. I had, it was 4 10s, but it got to the point they really needed me there for like 3 or 4 hours on a Friday just to tidy stuff up in the morning. I even tried to like, hey, can I come in the afternoon? They're like, no, we really need it done in the morning. So that was the end of that. And but that experience, James, kind of like, podcasting was really just, this is 2017. Podcasting was really starting to get some momentum. And by doing those 15 episodes, which were video and audio, both, kind of just proved I had enough chops, to get into this podcasting field on the hobby side, which on the hobby side was very in its infancy. There were only 4 or 5 shows at the time. Some of them were not consistent. They didn't have like a set schedule. And so I just said, you know what, I'll keep it on Fridays. I got, and I'll do it once a week. And, here we are, 5 years later, this week will be our 250th episode, which, is a lot of episodes when you think that's only one a week. So, that's sometimes when I think about that, it's just head scratching. I do have another show I wound up doing a few years later, added it to the arsenal, called Hobby Quick Hits, which is Mondays. Sportscard Nation always has a guest on it. Didn't start out initially like that, but pretty quickly into it, it changed over to that. And then the other show I do, like I said, Hobby Quick Hits on Mondays. It's a shorter form, 20, 25 minutes, just me kind of tackling one topic, kind of, I call it like a fire show, get in there, put out the fire and get out, say thank you, good night, we'll see you next time. And we're Sports Card Nation's the longer form, me and a guest or multiple guests and that sort of thing. So it's worked out pretty well. I think I got, people ask me like, what's the secret? I wish there was something. The only thing I could just point out to, I think I got in at the right time. I think sometimes timing is everything, as the cliche goes, but I think in this case that more of that than anything else.
Well, definitely congrats on the 250. Now, do you do any live broadcasts from actual trade, like from shows? I mean, or is everything's like recorded?
Yeah, I don't do a ton. I've done them before. I don't want to say, for some special episodes like episode 100, I did a live show. I had Dr. James Beckett on that show, who I've gotten to know over the course of the last 5 years. Great gentleman, icon of the hobby, and episode 200. I will do live stuff. I'll do interviews a lot of times on the show floor, but then edit them and then release them on, let's say, a week later or what have you, something like that. So I do another show, which is a live on. Well, it is recorded in audio form, but afterwards, but it is live on Saturday morning. It's called Hobby Hotline, and it's myself and 16 other like hobby content creators, three on a screen each week. So most of us are on just like once a month. We kind of have like a rotational schedule, and so there'll be three new people each Saturday morning, and it's a live call in, so someone can kind of jump in, come on the screen, and join the conversation. Tell us we're wrong, tell us we're right, or hey, what do you think about this? That sort of thing. It's not done a lot to be interactive, so I'm really proud of. That's called Hobby Hotline. So I'm really proud of that show. And then you get, 17 different faces and voices, three new ones usually every week as well. So that's if I do anything live a lot, that I'll point to that show.
Gotcha. Now, since you have your ear on the ground with the, sports card industry, like how is it? Is it up? Is it down? You always hear, fluctuating things.
You know, the one thing, like, right, there's clickbait in any content in any industry, and a lot of some of these content creators, the hobby's dying, the hobby's dead. I can tell you, as being a dealer for 30 something years, and in the hobby for 40 overall, and doing content creation for 5 years. When COVID hit, it was really the perfect storm, James, for that boom, that crescendo that we all know happened, and record setting auction prices. And reason being, more people were either out of work and at home, maybe getting, we got the stimulus checks or unemployment bonuses, and working from home. So you have a few extra hobby related tabs open on your work computer, and there was this, at the time, surplus money in the moment, right? The restaurants were closed, so you couldn't. Movie theaters were closed, so the entertainment side, you couldn't go to the movies or to a restaurant. So that money, people had that extra money, and cards really, not that COVID is a good thing, but the hobby sort of benefited from all those ingredients, and we just saw the hobby boom. And even without card shows, I mean, many card shows were obviously canceled for the same COVID reasons, but online in the hobby and auction sites, things were setting new records. Mano cards and Jackie Robinsons and not just cards, but memorabilia. Game use uniform, bats, and that sort of thing. And it exploded. It was making, became mainstream. Then you got a lot of like famous people, actors and musicians sort of getting in the hobby, or look what I purchased. This is awesome. I collected as a kid and I'm back. And so a lot of spotlight was on the hobby, and it was burning very hot. That, that sort of reset itself and calmed down. And so prices have sort of kind of come back. They're still slightly higher than pre-COVID. So no one's, I'm not complaining too much. During that crescendo, right? Things that maybe you could afford previously became out of reach potentially for some. So now things have kind of settled back down. I just did a show. It was a lot of people there, a lot of transactions, and a lot of people always equate lower prices means like business is failing or that industry is failing, and that's not really the only indicator. To me, an indicator is when you see less people at the show and less transactions. There are just as many transactions now. It's just that stuff will cost you less, and that's a good thing, right? With everything else that's up in price with inflation, and not to make it a political show, but we all know, in macroeconomics what's going on. So I like it. Some dealers may not be, they want to get the most bang for the buck. I get it, but it's like everything, right? What goes up must come down. It's just that's the nature of economics, and that's where we're at. But the hobby is alive and well. I tell people that all the time. Most people know. I don't really even have to tell them, but you get some people who like to get attention and will tell you like the end is near, and that sort of thing. But not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say.
Now, are you a fan of like autographs in general? Or because obviously you have, there's so many, could be things, could be bamboozles and stuff like that, or you just kind of like to focus on cards where a card's a card, you could tell if it's real or not.
Yeah, I'm not a huge in-person auto guy. I'm not against them. It's just, I did that kind of when I was a kid going to games. And I know, but what happens there is, the players are different now, James, than they were 20, 30 years ago because, they're afraid of their stuff going on eBay. And I think less athletes sign now in person anyways. Fanatics has something to do with that, and not just Fanatics, but even other companies with exclusive licensing with players. Like, hey, only sign, for us, and we'll put the cards in the packs. And so, it's a little trickier to get in person autos than ever before. You have a lot of shows, and we've seen at shows where athletes will uh, be signed to appear there. Those prices have definitely probably, most part, like 200% increase. So those opportunities are still around. It's just going to cost you a lot more. Most of the autos that I get would come out of like a pack, or you just go on a selling platform and find that card you're looking for and buy it. But TTM is a huge, through the mail autos is a huge market as well. And a lot of the players will still sign through the mail if you enclose. I don't partake in this, but it is a big niche of the hobby. Where if you enclose like return postage and send them a few cards, they may sign one or a few and send it back. Some will ask for a donation to their charity of choice, which is nothing wrong with that, right? Might as well, have a charity benefit as well. But that market has really, increased as well as far as the activity goes. More people are doing that. Some players or athletes or celebrities, won't sign that way, but and there's message boards that tells TTMers like, hey, he's signing, she's not signing, he's not signing, or he needs a $10 donation. And that way you can actually enclose that in your first mailing, and don't have to get it back and lose the stamp, so to speak. So that's a market that's really increased in the hobby.
And for card grading, I remember when I was more heavy into it, PSA was like the gold standard. Are they the only one, or are there other firms that do that?
Here's the crazy thing. So there's well into three digits of all sort of different grading stuff, and funny names, and GMA and Black Mamba and forensic grading. But generally in the hobby, we have what's called the big four or five. PSA is number one on that list. You have SGC, CGC, Beckett, Tag. Tag is one that uses all AI. Some people like that, some people don't. Um, I'm a human guy. I like a human element in there. I usually use the first two on the list, with that being PSA and SGC. But there's generally five that are sort of acknowledged and recognized as sort of the reputable grading card companies to deal with. But there's literally hundreds that exist if you so choose, and so the lesser known ones might be a little cheaper, but your cards will not be as valuable in their holder as they would be in the ones that are recognized sort of hobby universally.
And let's just say, a firm like PSA grades something near mint. Would they ever, like, let's say 5 years later, if you send it back, say, would you reconsider this? Would they even do that? Or would they say, no, once it's that's the end of it?
No, what people do, James, it's actually, I don't want to call it a game, but it's an actual tactic. Is people, if they don't like the grade, I've only done this one time, believe it or not, in my grading history, but some people do this quite a bit. Is you don't even necessarily ask them; they'll just crack it out of that slab. There's ways to get that open. It's not always easy, but you can do it, and they'll just send it back in. Sometimes they'll crack it out of one company's slab and send it to a different company, hoping for a higher grade. They'll cross grade it or try to cross it over. Sometimes you can what you said is true as well. You can send it, you can actually send your slab back. You still have to pay for it. They're not going to do it for free and say, can you look at this? And if it's this grade, if you feel like it's worthy of this grade, can you put it in a new slab? You can also do that with other companies. So you can send a PSA graded card to SGC, maybe PSA graded in an 8. You think they sort of dropped the ball, like this should have been a 9. You can pay for it, send it to SGC and say, hey, if you guys think this is a 9, I'll slab it in an SGC slab as a 9, and you're going to pay for that either way. So even if SGC says, no, I think they got it right at the 8, that's how we see it, you still have to pay for their time. So it's like a lottery ticket. You're sort of scratching it off and hoping it sort of hits.
Well, John, I appreciate all this insight you give us again, and I wish you continued success on the podcast. Again, Sports Card Nation podcast. Again, check out your future episodes coming up, and of course, follow you on X at SportsCard91. Again, John, appreciate your time, and again, continue. I wish you all the best on your continued success with the podcast.
Thanks, James. I had a lot of fun, and anytime.